When you start looking at high-end gaming rigs, the first thing that pops up is the price tag, and the temptation to go for a cheaper pre-built or even a DIY setup that promises gaming ready on a budget. I've seen a lot of friends spend a few $100 on a case and a mid-range CPU, only to end up wrestling with bottlenecks when they finally try to push modern titles past 60 frames per second. That regret is real, and it's why I wanted to see whether a machine like the Adamant Custom 24-core actually feels like a smarter buy rather than just another shiny spec sheet. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The first thing I looked at was the core count. A 24-core Intel Core Ultra 9 is not something you find in most consumer gaming boxes. In practice, that many cores shine when you're running a game while also streaming, recording, or having dozens of background processes, think voice chat, game capture software, and perhaps a couple of tabs with music and Discord all open. For a creator gamer who wants to keep the stream at 1080p 60 frames per second while the game itself runs at ultra settings, the extra cores give you that headroom without the dreaded stutter spikes you sometimes see on lower-end CPUs. If you're just playing single-player titles and never leave the game window, you'll probably never tap into more than a fraction of those cores. Memory is another practical factor. The 64GB of DDR5 isn't about loading textures faster, it's about not having to think about it at all. I tested a session where I had the game, a video editing program, a web browser with multiple tabs, and a virtual machine running a Linux distro for testing mods. The system never hit the 90% mark on RAM usage, which means you can swap between demanding tasks without watching the performance meter creep upward. For most gamers, 16GB is plenty, but the 64GB here future-proofs the rig for the next few years, especially as titles start to use more RAM for things like ray-traced assets and AI-driven NPCs. Storage is where the Adamant really feels at home. A 1TB Samsung 990 EVO on a PCIe 4.0x4 interface loads games in under 10 seconds, and the OS boots almost instantly. In my real-world test, I installed a fresh copy of Cyberpunk 2077, launched it, and hit the main menu in 8.2 seconds. That speed translates to less waiting time between matches in fast-paced shooters and quicker level transitions in open-world adventures. The downside is that there's only a single 1TB drive. If you're a collector with a library of 4K game installs, you'll either need an external SSD or a secondary internal drive, which the case can accommodate but adds cost. One thing that catches the eye is the integrated graphics solution. The spec sheet calls it integrated, which means there's no discrete GPU card. For a machine marketed as a gaming desktop, that can feel like a red flag. In practice, the integrated GPU can handle esports titles Fortnite, Valorant, CS:GO comfortably at 1080p high settings, but you'll start to see frame drops in demanding AAA games that rely heavily on dedicated graphics horsepower. If you're planning to play titles that push ray tracing or want 1440p 4K performance, you'll need to add a discrete GPU yourself. That extra purchase defeats part of the Adamant promise and adds to the total cost. Thermal management is where the 360mm AIO liquid cooler shines. Under a stress test that ran a combination of gaming and streaming for an hour, the CPU temperature hovered around 70°C, which is respectable for a 24-core part. The cooler is pre-installed, so you don't have to fiddle with mounting brackets or pump loops. However, the liquid loop does add a point of failure. If the pump were to develop a leak, you'd be looking at a costly repair. The system comes with a 3-year warranty, which helps mitigate that risk, but it's still something to keep in mind if you're a DI-averse buyer. Connectivity is another practical win. Wi-Fi 7, 802.11b, with a 2x2 antenna array offers low latency and higher throughput, which matters for competitive online play where every millisecond counts. I paired the machine with a 6 gigabits per second router and saw consistent ping under 20 milliseconds in a 5 GHz band, even when streaming. Bluetooth 5.4 also gives you a stable link for wireless controllers and headsets. For users who live in apartments without easy Ethernet runs, that wireless performance can be a real convenience. Who should consider the Adamant Custom 24-core? If you're a content creator who streams, records, and edits videos while gaming, the massive core count, abundant RAM, and fast SSD create a workflow that feels seamless. It also appeals to enthusiasts who want a high-performance base that they can later upgrade with a discrete GPU, essentially buying a future-proof chassis now and adding the graphics card when they're ready. On the other hand, if you're a casual gamer who primarily plays esports or older titles, the integrated GPU will limit you, and you'd probably get better value from a pre-built system that already includes a dedicated graphics card. The practical weaknesses.